This is Trami from the team, and I will be with you in this hour. So the chat will start by a brief introduction of the Mills Fabrica and the competition, and we will follow by the panel section, which cover the general trends, residency and support, as well as the competition tips. So let's get started. So the Mills Fabrica is under南丰Group, a privately held conglomerate headquartered in Hong Kong. And our office is located at the Mills, which is the building that you can see in the picture. And then this is where heritage meets innovation. And we have innovation from textiles to textile. So the Mills is a project that transforms an old textile mills into a new heritage, retail, and innovation center. And here at the Mills Fabrica, we are the innovation arm of the Mills. It is a startup incubator, investment fund, and spaces that's dedicated to creating textile impact stories and building a global textile community. And so let's talk about our fields on textile. So what is textile? We define textile in three main categories in the two industry, which is one, the agri-food tech and the textile apparel, and which is also the categories that you can select in this competition. And so for textile, we flew out first the sustainable supply chain and production to ingredients, materials, and products innovation, and then the sustainable platform and circular models. So for sustainable supply chain and production, we look for technologies that enable better and more efficient supply chains and production processes. So like Unspun and Renewcell, one of our startups. So Unspun is a customized jeans, which they use the smallest impact and to have the largest lifespan of the jeans. And for Renewcell, they collect the old cotton and also cellulose fibers into new materials. And then for ingredients, materials, and product innovation, we look for technologies that help improve sustainability in the agri-food tech and the apparel and textile industry. So you can learn from calorific shelters and also modern synthesis in this part. So calorifics, they use synthetic biology to create the dyeing process, and then so that it is resinous as also waterless. And then for Jalta, they create the ingredients, and then their partner is one of the Korean famous brand, AHC, sorry about that. And then for modern synthesis, we have invited the founder to be here with you all today. So I will let her to introduce the company later. So, and also we look for the sustainable platforms and circular models. And so we can look about the Abelian. Abelian is a social media platform where it is a member-generated content, and then people can use their social media to be more sustainable, whether they shop or eat. And then the refills will generate it to our donate credit, which is to donate it to the people in need. So in terms of support, we support startups as well as you guys in three key ways. So the first one is the exposure. So you can see that we have a lot of showcases and also retail exposure experience for the startups. And you can see in the picture on the right-hand side. And then we also provide connections where you can connect with the most valued company and then to have future collaborations with them throughout our events and the gatherings. And then we also provide advisory for the startups. So we have customized support plan for each one of them and to help them to develop and grow. And they also have exclusive events and webinar to know about their current trend and also the research insights. So in conclusion, at the Mills Fabrica, we create a global innovation platform and we welcome you all to join us in this community. So what you can do is you join our Textile for Social Good 2021 International Online Competition. So our aim is to raise awareness and spark ideas, and then to create a platform for you to exchange and collaborate within the textile innovations and industry, and to inspire sustainability and circularity. so that we want to nurture new talents like yourself and to further your dreams and to make your ideas into reality. So we have a total of 5 prizes in this competition. So we have 2 grand prizes and it is separated in category. So make sure you select the right one when you apply for the competition. So for grand prizes, you are entitled of 15,000 cash prize Hong Kong dollar and 3 months of incubation program, which the support I've mentioned just now. And then you will also have 3 months of that service and 6 months full Fabrica Lab membership. And of course, you can join our community events. And for special prize, you will be entitled 5,000 cash prize and also 2 sessions of mentorship, which membership is also the support that we have mentioned just now. And then for hot desk services and Fabrica Lab membership, it will be 3 months. And then the community prize will be fully selected by the public, where the finalists will send us 1-minute video, and then we will post it on our social media. And those who get the most likes will have entitled 5,000 cash prize. So who can join us? So we welcome individual or group entries with maximum 5 members in total. And you must have at least 1 member who is a current student or graduated in the last 3 years, which is year 2018 or after. And then because we have a live Q&A session for the final competition, so you must have at least 1 team member to join on that day. So now let me pass it over to Maggie, and she will be moderating the panel discussion. So if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to type it in the chat room, and then our speakers will answer you shortly.
Yeah, thank you very much, Trami, and thanks for everybody for joining us today. And I'm happy to be here together with Dee from Bits and Bytes and also Angus from the research team at the Mills Fabrica. So I think to start off, perhaps I can let Dee and Angus to share a little bit about themselves and what they do respectively at Bits and Bytes and also the Mills Fabrica. Maybe I can pass it over to Dee first.
Thank you, Maggie. This is Dee from Bits and Bytes. So we are a food and agriculture focused venture capital, and we look into majorly early stage technology, which is very special for us is actually we majorly look for upstream and midstream solutions for the industry to make it more sustainable and to provide safer food and healthier food for the consumers. And I'm the principal of Bits and Bytes, and my main focus is actually for agriculture and midstream technology for Asia Pacific. So very happy to have the opportunity and share here. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dee. And what about Angus?
Yeah, thank you, Maggie, and hello, Dee, and everyone on the call. This is Angus from the research team of the Mills Fabrica. So a brief introduction of my role here is I help to build an internal knowledge base for the team. One way to do so is we do a lot of content write-up and research report publications. Previously, we have published reports on the circular economy, ESG impact assessment, and recently we have placed a heavy emphasis on the synthetic biology as well. So today I'm very happy to share what we see and our insights in the textiles and apparel space together with Bits and Bytes.
Cool. So today on this panel, we'll actually discuss a little bit more about the trends that we see in the 2 main verticals that we focus on for this competition, respectively on the food and agriculture tech, as well as the apparel and textile technology. So when we look at the technology and innovation economies today, especially with COVID-19 pandemic, there is increasing awareness in the sustainability angle and also resilience in different businesses. And therefore, we see a growing demand in technology advancement and sustainable innovation to improve the environmental impact in different industries, and especially in the food or in the way we actually interact with the people and the planet. So I think maybe we can start off with Dee. So what are some of the new innovations that you see, especially in the food scene, that are actually gaining more traction with some of the key companies or brands in the market?
Yeah, so I think one of the major trend for downstream consumption on consumer foods is more about like plant-based. It for sure is a global trend, even for Chinese market, which is quite early with this. It brings about the consumers' awareness on environment and also animal welfare, so on both sides. However, it also calls for better solutions to provide healthier plant-based products of clean label. So you compare with the existing animal-based protein, actually plant-based is a kind of like deep processed products instead of a fresh meat products. So making it healthier, I think, is next to this like first stage of the trend. So solutions usually comes from upstream and midstream. So we invested into one chickpea company for chickpea farming. For the chickpea ingredient, it not only can bring about the property of clean label because it has better emulsification effect with its food function, but also the chickpea farming consumes much less water to produce the equivalent amount of protein. So we think it will have a lot of like positive environmental impact, both upstream and downstream. And we also invested into synthetic biology. I think Angus also mentioned. So we hope to see new method to produce chemicals in a way that has much less pollution and greenhouse gas emission. So synthetic biology for sure is one of a huge topic for us as well. And also I think for midstream technology, upcycling of food waste is another big trend for global companies. And I think also currently this trend is about replacing the existing animal farming industry to some extent, but we still have to stay with this industry for quite a long time. So we still look into solutions that can help improve the efficiency of animal production and like milking, because the animal farming is one of the largest source of at least greenhouse emission. In China, it brings up a lot of like problem with the manure treatment. So I think under the greener like village and the national strategy of environmental protection, technologies can always find a lot of applications in animal farming to make it more like environmental friendly. And also for crop farming, I think the problem with pea protein, some will claim that it's a huge consumption on glyphosate. So for precision agriculture and to limit the use of chemicals for upstream is also one of the topic we think that has great potential. And also like to how to do vertical farming, I think it's also very important for the upstream players. So I think to break it down into downstream, midstream, and upstream, we can at least have such kind of opportunities to go with.
Yeah, I think interestingly, you mentioned that replacing animal farm industry is one of the key things. That's why we focus a lot on, for example, healthier plant-based. I think that's also some of the key trends that we see in the apparel industry. And one of the core mission is, also, of course, to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. So Angus, do you see similar trends actually in the apparel and textile industry?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, animal-free is definitely a very hot keyword that I see, like plant-based materials that Dee mentioned earlier. Actually, apart from plant-based meat or food that people now more people understand, actually, for the fashion space, there is also plant-based leather, which maybe fewer people know about it. A startup called Bold Fresh, they make proteins from mushrooms to create leather-like fabric called Milo. And what they did has attracted attention from a lot of international brands like Adidas, Lululemon, and Kering as well. And so apart from plant-based leather, we also see lab-grown leather, which is the use of synthetic biology to make use of some yeast to grow collagen. And animal-free is a key idea behind all these new materials. So I would say the rise of new materials is also a shared trend with the food space as well, especially when we are now talking about moving away from the fossil fuel-based economy, especially plastics. And apart from new materials, I would also say another innovation is making better use of waste. We are now reimagining the value of waste and trying to prevent waste from happening. To do so, there are two ways. First, we see more companies, they have tried to make their designs recyclable and also to increase the use of recycled content for their product lines. For example, I know that Adidas, they release a sneakers line called the Future Craft Loop, which is 100% recyclable line of their running shoes. And I know more similar companies are doing things like that. And we are trying to get our used stuff away from landfills. And this has also given rise to some secondhand marketplace. We've heard the names of Depop, ThredUp in the Western world. And also in China, there's a white closet to make use of some secondhand clothing. So I would say new materials and preventing waste from happening are definitely large themes that drive innovations in the textiles and apparel space as well.
Yeah, I think waste reduction and also upcycling is also one of the key words that we always see in different like articles, discussions. And interestingly, Angus, you mentioned about both threads, this company, and how they actually work with different large brands like Lululemon. So perhaps can you share a little bit about like what you see in the industry? So what are some of the key players working on in terms of sustainability commitment? And perhaps we can explore a little bit about like, in terms of innovation, what are the innovators are doing, but are they actually meeting the market demand? Is there something, a need from the brands or companies that you see?
Yes, we definitely see more brands are interested in having such kinds of pilots with startups or innovators to trial out new materials and new business models in order to become more sustainable. So generally speaking, the goals of these brands are to move towards a carbon neutral economy, whether they commit to a circular supply chain or adopt new materials. While for the gap between demand and supply, I would say we need more pilots to prove such new ideas, because what we are seeing is that these nascent solutions are already out there, but not many people know about it. And it's like a chicken and egg questions. If you don't have more people to try it out and test it, then it will have less chance of being experiment and therefore scale up. But we definitely see a lot of brands are trying to adopt new materials and things like that. For example, apart from Adidas, there are also Hermes, the ultimate luxury brand, also try to make the Victoria bag with the mycelium, which is also a mushroom-based alternative material. And also Levi's are also trying to make use of plant-based dyes so as to reduce the use of chemicals in the production process. So I would say we need more pilots to close the gap between this demand and supply.
Yeah, thanks, Angus. And do you see similar trends in the food space? Like there is a striking balance of demand and supply of the innovation?
Yeah, I think for food industry is also true, and one of the huge demand from the industry player actually one of another material that is for packaging. So I think food packaging consumed 60% of the world total plastic use. So especially for those European companies, they promise that by 2030, they will have to fully replace the use of single-use plastics. But there are very few commercialized solutions that can be biodegradable, that is workable for them. So some of them are even desperate that they will even switch back to glasses. So I think this is one of the huge opportunities for the startups. But we see a lot of innovations, but material is always a time consuming industry to tap into. You will have to be aware that the packaging material usually is not one single formulation. So if you want to tap into the industry with a particular technology breakthrough, you will have to develop the downstream formulation and work with other materials and do mix, do hybrid, and also try to answer all the needs from the industry in terms of the function. And another big trend that is learning for all these food companies actually upcycling. I think Angus also mentioned that part. For upcycling and also for packaging, I think the innovators have to fully understand that direct cost saving solutions will have great potential. But it is usually brought about by technology revolution like synthetic biology. And also you will have to integrate with the existing supply chain. So one example for upcycling, I think a lot of startups are working on the upcycling of fermentation residues for beer industry. I think a lot of Western companies are doing this. But however, at least in China, there are a lot of local collectors who pay for the residues. And that is because those fermentation residues, that is mainly barley, is a high protein feed for dairy cow, and you ferment it so the protein is even works better for the dairy cows. So for startup, you will have to consider those residues in a real world case won't be free. So you probably will have to pay for it. Then how you calculate the economics. So I think, yes, there are a lot of needs from the industry, but for innovators, because you're kind of a to-B solution provider, you have to think about what the existing value chain works, and how to integrate with this is one of the key problem they have to solve. Yeah.
Yeah, so we talked a bit about on the market demand side, and I think Dee, you also touched on some of the challenges that the innovators should actually think about, like the cost savings, like the economics of scale, and also whether the existing supply chain can support their innovation. So do you see other challenges in terms of execution and scaling their solutions, specifically in the food industry? Is there anything that they need to bear in mind?
Yeah, I think for food industry will be very different for maybe with textiles, because the regulation barrier is usually very high. So I think for all the startups that tap into food industry, like for synthetic biology, apart from except for the market in of the US, like in Europe or in China, you have to think about that the strain you're working on is actually GMO strain. So the regulation will be very complicated. So you'll have to stay with the no market entry in some particular market, and work with the regulation for relatively long time. And especially I think for Asian market, the regulation is the most challenging part is uncertainty instead of the long time and high cost. So that means I think for to be business, it's usually easier for the industry veterans. Also reflecting what I have mentioned before, that is to how to integrate with the existing supply chain. So we see that for to C market, because you have to understand the Z generation, and usually post 95 years old, those young men will come into the industry, but for to-B business, it's usually for those like veterans who have a lot of experience in the industry. And I think pace is usually very important. So probably you have a good solution, and it's really hard for you to persuade the first tier players like those food giants. Those MNCs are really hard to persuade, and they are like relatively slow to switch. So you have to work with the second tier, smaller players, and then have a good demo. And then maybe you can move on to the first tiers. So this is one of the pace you can work with the potential clients. And some of the hardest thing for the for food industry, and also maybe for animal farming and for food packaging, is because without scale, you can't even like tap into the market. So for food industry, it's usually about like scale and stability is so important. And for example, for the beer like fermentation residue treatment, you have to be aware those residues will come up every day, right? You have the capacity to treat them so that this solution will be meaningful. So how to get to that scale is also a very important thing to keep in mind. So for startups, it's wise for them to think about how to leverage the market capital, like to work with the VC and to tap into the market with a good demo, and then to scale up as quickly as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Dee. And then Angus, any insights from your side on the apparel and textile side of things in terms of challenges in execution for the innovators?
Yes, cost is definitely an important factor, especially when we talk about achieving price parity with conventional materials. Like think about plastics, which is such a versatile, convenient material that comes at a cheap cost. How can we convince the existing suppliers and companies all turn to bio-based materials, which are more expensive, but although they come with upside of more environmental friendly, but how can we like convince people to turn to the bio-based materials? That is definitely a challenge there. And another factor I would say is how can you get into the mindsets of the consumers? Maybe this has to do with education. For example, I know like for plant-based meat, they started first in the US or in the West, but recently the development of plant-based meat in China is moving and having quite a lot of traction, and the local startups focus on this space as well. But they have, what they do is a bit different. That is, they tailor their plant-based products to traditional Chinese cuisines like dumplings, or to make it easier to cook, because Chinese people tend to like to have the full meat patties to cook at their home. So you have to think about how to get into the mindsets of the consumers, and this has to rely on education, whether it is to promote the good messages behind about environmental conservations, or through marketing messages. Just like nowadays we are all using Zoom, but before the pandemic, like maybe not so many people in Hong Kong or China are using it, but now we all get to use Zoom. So we need to have an awakening moment to get us to understand the usefulness of these new materials and new technologies that bring benefits to the environment as a whole.
Yeah, thank you, Dee and Angus. And today we touched on a different areas in terms of like what are the innovations that we see in the industry, and what is the market demand that we see from the companies, brands, and some of the challenges some of the innovators may face in their execution phase or in terms of scaling up. So I think to wrap up the panel today, perhaps can I ask the two of you to give one final piece of advice to the students who are interested in applying to this competition, when they submit the business case to us, is there any particular area that you will focus on in terms of your judging?
Yeah, I think in a sum, it's all about, I think it's all about market and supply. So it's actually to understand more about who are your, I mean, for those startup teams, who are their clients and who will be their like consumers and what actually they need, instead of like only stick to what they have for them all. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Dee. And Angus, please.
I would say my one sentence or two sentence summary will be to do your research well and think about which particular problem that you are solving. It doesn't have to be complicated as long as your solution really hits the mark and really resolve the problem well. And that will be a winning solution to me.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dee and Angus, and thank you for everybody for joining us on this panel. Hope that gives you some insight in these two industry and innovation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think coming up next is still me here. So we have invited another speaker to join us in this coming session. So who's Jen Keane. Jen Keane is the founder of Modern Synthesis, one of the incubatees of the Mills Fabrica. Hello, Jen.
Hello, are you able to hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
There we go. I think you should be able to see me now. Hi, everyone.
Yes.
How are you doing?
Yeah, perfect. Hi. Thanks for getting on here today with us. So I think with Jen Keane today, perhaps we can share a little bit more about what they do. And Jen Keane actually, she joined one of the competition in the past as well. And she was also one of the winners of the competition. So she can definitely share about her experience throughout the competition and some of the support that she received after the competition to complete her project. So I think to start off, perhaps, Jen, can you share a little bit more about your current project, which is your company, Modern Synthesis, like what you do, and a bit about yourself, please.
Sure. So yes, I'm Jen Keane. I'm co-founder and CEO of Modern Synthesis. We're a London-based biomaterial startup evolving the way we make fashion materials with biology, as a lot of people have touched on today. But specifically, we employ microbes to grow new types of materials made of cellulose, which is the natural building block found in materials like cotton and wood, through a process we call microbial weaving. So this is a biofabrication process, meaning the material is actually grown and assembled by these living organisms, or specifically bacteria in our case. And we see this as the next generation of biomaterials, helping to displace these petrochemical-based synthetic leathers and films, and even synthetic textiles, with a completely new type of biocomposite material that is naturally biodegradable and infinitely renewable.
Cool. And I think maybe we can also ask you to share a little bit more about the project that you had back then when you entered into the competition, so that the students online can have a sense of what it is like and what is the transition from having like a competition type of projects and develop it into a company.
Of course. So I did the MA Material Futures course at Central St. Martin's, and I finished that up in 2018. So that project was called This Is Grown. And coming from the sportswear industry prior, I was really addressing the topic of plastics, which is prevalent through what we're still doing in our work. But the project was really about showing the potential of nature to, and working with natural organisms and biology, to create alternatives that were not just sort of drop-in replacements, but could also change our approach to the way we make, and also to just show that nature and natural doesn't have to be boring, and actually it is quite technical. So I grew the upper of a shoe to show this potential of the early versions of microbial weaving. And yeah, had a great reception to that. And that's the project that I entered for the Textile Prize at the time. And that kind of transition, which is a really interesting one that I'm sure a lot of you have questions about, is how to transition the ideas you have in school to real work that's affecting the rest of the world and to make a real impact. And so at that point, when I won the competition, this was my journey from how do I take this idea to reality, and now the company in Modern Synthesis.
Yeah, so back then when you enter into the competition, what was you thinking, or what were you expecting to actually get out of this kind of competition?
I mean, obviously you never really know what fully to expect. But for me, I was looking for one, an ability to keep making things. So when you in the university, you have access to labs and studios and a lot of equipment that you just don't have normally. So I was excited to be able to work in the Fabrica lab, which had just opened in Hong Kong at the time, to be able to just continue making. But also to be introduced to others in this space and have those conversations around building a business potentially, and just learning from others that were maybe a few steps ahead of me.
Yeah, and can you share a little bit more about like when you were here with us, like physically at the Mills Fabrica, and what who are the partners that you actually met, and how actually those partners helped you to build your business further, like in terms of manufacturing or material sourcing, or anything that you can think of?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, some specifics I was introduced to when I was in Hong Kong, the Hong Kong Productivity Council, they've got a great makerspace as well, where I was able to utilize some of their equipment, which was super helpful. Lensing, Woolmark, I had some really interesting conversations with them early on, both in kind of sourcing yarns from them potentially, and kind of building those relationships that were really helpful. I think also digitally, I was introduced to Bolt Threads, which was sort of the next stage in my development, and getting to work with them in California. Yeah.
Yeah, interestingly, so Bolt Threads, actually Angus from the previous panel discussion also mentioned about Bolt Threads. So they work with quite a lot of different large players. So definitely can give some good advice on your company. So I think for the students online, so can perhaps we can wrap this up with like what would be the advice that you would be giving to the students who are planning to participate of this type of competition, and how should they be preparing for their business case and submissions?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would say first thing is focus on your strengths, and whether you're working on your own or even a team, I think about what you're really bringing to the problem that's different from anyone else approaching it. Because I think a lot of times you might be approaching the same problem, but in a new way will be completely different solution or completely valid. And I think it's important to recognize that it doesn't have to be completely reinventing the wheel. It's just taking a new perspective on it and bringing those skills and strengths that you have to the table. I think also it's good to think about where you want to go in the future with it. I mean, in the context of your studies and what you're trying to achieve, but also what would you do if you had more funding or more time, and really think big picture about the future as well when you're doing these projects, and acknowledge that, yeah, I mean, you can do so much in a short amount of time, but where do you want to go in the future with it?
Yeah, definitely. And thanks, Jen. I think we hope to inspire and encourage more students like yourself to start with like an idea through a competition, and eventually building up a new business and innovation, and exploring their way on their entrepreneurship journey. And cool. And thank you very much, Jen. Thanks for getting on this with us today.
Great. Thank you so much. Good to see you.
Thanks.
Bye.
I think to wrap this up, perhaps I can share a little bit more on the judging criteria for all the students online, for those who are especially interested in participating in this competition. So for this competition, we are focusing on 3 key areas in terms of judging. First is on innovation, second on the impact to society, and third on scalability. And for innovation, so I think summing up what we discussed in the panel discussion and also our conversation with one of the past winner. So innovation is important that you are addressing a solution to the real problem that is actually happening in the real world. And so you need to understand the industry, understand the society in order to come up with these pinpoint and the solutions. And in terms of innovation, we also look a lot on the uniqueness of your solution in terms of concept, the design, the technology, and even the user experience of the solution. And it's important to highlight that is your technology or your solution is not easily to be replicated, and highlight the analysis or the competitive advantage of the business's case. And then in terms of the impact, so I think we can actually summarize it into key things in the environmental impact and also the impact to the society. So we briefly touched on carbon emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, which is one of the key agenda items on all organizations across different industries. So I think in your submission is also good to actually highlight why your solution is actually environmental friendly. How does it actually improve the planet health and also the human health, improve the lives to contribute to a better society? It would be good if you can actually show us some of the impact measurement metrics, some of the numbers to quantify your impact. And in terms of scalability, I think is also very important to mention about your business strategy, especially your go-to-market strategy, where you're starting your solutions and how is your solution be applied in different scenarios, in what kind of industries and sectors, and as much as the details that you can give on the business case that will actually show us the market demand and how you can actually supply to fit in. So I think last final tip from my side is that remember to actually think from the perspective of the consumer, of the target end users, and see what they need in the market and how you can actually address their needs. Cool, I think that's it from my end, and I'll pass it over back to Tremi.
So thank you, Maggie. And here is your chance. Join us for the Textile for Social Good 2021 International Online Competition, and win prizes worth over USD 65,000 and be the next game changer. So some key days to remember. The applications will be closing on the 31st of July, and avoid being a deadline fighter. Do submit your applications earlier, and you can resubmit before the date, and we will only take the latest submission into account. So we will then review the application and announce the semi-finalists in early September, and the final competition will be held online in early September. So before you submit your application, make sure you read the requirements and provide all the necessary information. So select the category and also submit us the word summary as well as the presentation deck and a video. So does anyone have any further questions for us? Okay, so if you would like to know more about our events and updates, please follow us on Instagram, and we will be sharing more tips and tricks there. So make sure you don't miss them. So we are about to end our fireside chat. And if you have any further questions, please email me at tremi.cho@themillsfabrica.com.